Welcome, 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 everybody. How you doing? Be sure to hit the like button. Be sure to hit the subscribe button. Be sure to hit the notifications bell. So glad to have you all here with us. It is late at night, just after 10:30, and I'm here in my lovely Brooklyn apartment. So glad to be able to chat with all of you. Welcome, everybody. So glad. So many great developments are in the works. A lot going on. The world seems to always pick up pace. In September. September, things certainly get going, right? That slow summer is over. The weather is starting to change, and the world starts to pick up a rhythm. Kids are back in school. Wow, crazy time. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notifications bell. Welcome, everybody. And so the way it works here, for those who may be unfamiliar, the way it works is that the way we do things here is that I give my opening remarks, and then from there, I do the roll call and I call you out as I see you, names and locations. And then from there, after that, I answer your super chat questions for the rest of the night. Your super chat questions for the rest of the night. So if you have a super chat question, by all means, just send it to me, and I will write it down. I will write it down with the unnamed pen and the unnamed notebook, and I will answer your super chat question in the second half of the show. I will give you an answer. It may not be the answer that you want. It may be, I don't know who that is. I get that sometimes. People send me, hey, what do you think of? And it's a name I've never heard of, and so I can't answer that question. However, I will do my best to answer your question to the best of my ability to say something. You may ask me something that the answer is none of your business. You may ask me something. That's just how it works. I will give you an answer. You may not like that answer. I will do my best to give you a good answer, and that's why people keep coming back. This is going to be what? I think this will be 291. This will be the 291st live stream we have done. 291 lives. That is our community. That is the strength of our community. 291 lives. And many more. Approaching 300. We are unstoppable. We are absolutely unstoppable. We keep going. So be sure to tweet this out. Be sure to post this on Reddit. Post this on Facebook. Post this on wherever videos are posted. Bunker Chan, Lefty Poll, Instagram, Facebook groups, wherever videos are posted, post this video. And let's have a great conversation. Let's have a fun conversation. Tweet it out. Let's go. All right, I will give my opening remarks. Keep in mind, I'm writing super chats down for the second half of the show. I will write down the super chats. I will write them down, so you better send them, because that's what makes the second half of our show so much fun. All right, folks. Now, for those of you who may not be aware, this is the big week of the United Nations, right? This is the week of the United Nations when all the heads of state are giving their remarks. We heard from Joe Biden. We heard from the new Iranian president. Now, many heads of state are just giving a pre-recorded statement, pre-recorded presentation. They're not actually coming in person, but some are, right? You know, Joe Biden, obviously it's the United States, so here he is. Some other heads of state are actually here in person. Right. Welfare. Statism. Here, I'll use the other pen. Excuse me. All right. Fall allergies. All right. Welfare statism. Best way to stabilize capitalism. Right. Austerity caused by hegemony. All right, and then the next one, we got another one. The biggest problem with treating communism like an issue of culture, right? Problems of treating cultural, removing economics. All right. Very good. So it's the big week of the UN. Joe Biden gave his remarks, and there's a couple of things I wanted to talk about. Okay. Stalin's rule, continuation of Peter the Great. Wrote it down, Cameron. So, a couple things I wanted to talk about. First things first, apparently, now you can't make this up. You really can't make this up. According to the news reports, the United States government, the Biden administration, is currently looking for a private contractor to help set up a detention facility for migrants in Guantanamo Bay. Did folks see that? The U.S. government is looking for a private contractor to help set up a facility for migrants in Guantanamo Bay. Now, weren't the Democrats and Barack Obama the ones that said they were going to close Guantanamo Bay? Isn't it a huge source of international embarrassment that the U.S. government has been torturing people at Guantanamo Bay? Isn't Guantanamo Bay awful? But no, now the Democrats are not closing down Guantanamo Bay. They're privatizing Guantanamo Bay, and they are going to start putting undocumented people there who try to come to the United States. Yeah, now could you imagine if Donald Trump did this? People would be outraged, but I guess Biden is doing it, so you're a fascist if you talk about it, right? It's pretty unbelievable. It's pretty unbelievable. A couple months ago, I interviewed the lawyer, Nancy Hollander, who has represented inmates at Guantanamo Bay, is currently representing them. She also represented Chelsea Manning, and she is currently working on the case of Alex Saab. And that brings me to the Alex Saab case. So who is Alex Saab? Alex Saab is a Venezuelan diplomat who was negotiating with Iran to get food sent to Venezuela. Thank you for the super chat, Third Rail. Much appreciated. He was negotiating with Iran to get food sent to Venezuela. He was also talking to countries in the African Union. And his plane touched down in Cape Verde, and the U.S. government apprehended him, basically had the Cape Verde authorities grab him, apprehend him, and extradite him. He's going to be extradited to the United States. And here's the thing. Iran is a sovereign, independent country. Venezuela is a sovereign, independent country. And if Iran and Venezuela want to do business with each other, want to ship food to each other, that is their business. It has absolutely nothing to do with the United States. And if the United States cares about the Venezuelan people, why is it so determined to keep them from getting food that it grabs diplomats? It grabs diplomats in third-party countries. All this time we're told, oh, socialism's so bad in Venezuela, the people are starving. Here, Venezuela, they have had difficulties. They have had shortages. They import most of their food, and because of that, they've had difficulties because of the sanctions and because of corruption and other problems. So they have been dealing with a bit of a crisis, and medical supplies too, exactly. And Venezuela sends one of their top diplomats to go to Iran to work out getting food to Venezuela. And does the U.S. government say, good, we love the Venezuelan people. We're always talking about how they're starving, so if they can get some food, why, gee golly, we love that. No, they apprehend the diplomat, and they're going to fly him back to the United States and put him in prison. This is unbelievable. This is absolutely unbelievable. Right? The amount of hypocrisy. And of course, the Alex Saab case has gotten no publicity in American media. It's unjustifiable. And it seems like this is now the new U.S. strategy. Now that the USA doesn't seem confident enough to invade countries like it once did, right? It used to be the USA invades Iraq, the USA invades Panama, the USA bombs the former Yugoslavia. Well, now it seems like now that there's, Russia and China in the world, and there's a rising anti-imperialist bloc, and they don't feel like they can just roll into countries like they used to. Now what they do is they kidnap people. I mean, the USA has turned into the FARC. The U.S. government has turned into the FARC. They want something, they kidnap somebody. They kidnap Alex Saab, top Venezuelan diplomat. They kidnap the chief financial officer of Huawei Technologies, Meng. They grabbed this Russian woman who was dating an NRA guy or whatever. Do you remember that whole thing? They grabbed this Russian woman who supports the National Rifle Association, and they hold her for so long. What was her name? I mean, this is what they do now. Basically, if the USA wants to get something out of a country, they grab somebody. They grab a person from that country. They kidnap them, right? Julian Assange, great example. Julian Assange, right? But they just grab people now. I mean, basically, the U.S. imperialist military that once, bombed the world and all of that has basically turned into the mafia. It's turned into a kidnapping service. I mean, that's basically what the U.S. government is doing. And that makes sense why Joe Biden is anxious to expand Guantanamo and put up a facility for migrants and all that. I mean, if the U.S. government is moving to become a kidnapping agency, and that's how they're enforcing their foreign policy, well, it would make sense. It would totally make sense. She's leftward shift. It would totally make sense. Totally make sense that they would want to expand their facility. But, I mean, this is like everything, Maria Butina, yes. This is everything that the left is supposed to be against. We're supposed to be against mistreatment of migrants. We're supposed to be against Guantanamo Bay. And we're supposed to be against private prisons. Joe Biden's doing it. He's basically just saying to all the people who voted for him, all the people who actually voted for him, screw you guys. Screw you guys. Barack Obama was president for 8 years. And the whole 8 years he kept saying, I'm going to close down Guantanamo. And he didn't do it. He did not do it. And they blamed it on Republicans. They just said, there's no place we could have a trial, so I guess we just can't do it. There are people from Guantanamo Bay who have been released who are now in the Taliban government. Did you know that? There were people that were released from Guantanamo Bay to the Taliban government. I mean, this is getting so ridiculous. It is getting so unbelievably ridiculous, right? And all the bread tube young Turks shaming, oh my God, Joe Biden, you got to vote for him. You got to vote for him to stop these policies. I mean, well, the fact that Joe Biden is privatizing Guantanamo Bay and going to start putting migrants there and expanding it. I mean, I'm sorry, this is to stop fascism, right? To stop fascism. If Donald Trump was doing this, there would be a rallying cry among Congress. There'd be protests happening. They would never allow it. But you saw the video of the Haitian migrants and the whipping and all of that. I mean, and here we are, right? But hey, no one, this is, you have to vote for this or you're a neo-Nazi, right? I mean, this is the ridiculousness. This is where this Democratic Party shilling has gotten us. But, Venezuela does not get enough credit. At the demonstration today, shout out to the John Brown volunteers. They did a great job at the demonstration. They were there. They read from the manual. They read from the We Are City Builders manual at the demonstration. You can watch the video. It's on the YouTube channel here. You can watch the video of the John Brown volunteers at the rally to free Alex Saab outside of the Cape Verde UN mission. They did a great job. They were there raising awareness about the Alex Saab case, along with activists from many different, organizations that are involved in Latin American solidarity. They were there, and Venezuela is a country that has taken great strides to raise its people up out of poverty, right? And we talk about this in the We Are City Builders, the Center for Political Innovation educational manual. You will get concrete data in this manual about what Venezuela has accomplished. I'll just read to you. I'm not going to read verbatim. I'll just point to some of the facts that are in here. For example, in 1998, when Chavez was elected president of Venezuela, the country had only 12 public universities. 12 universities in the whole country, only 12 public universities in Venezuela. Now, how many public universities does Venezuela have? How many does Venezuela have? It used to have 12 when Chavez was first elected in 1998. Before socialism, it had 12 universities. Now it has 32. Did you hear that? A country went from having 12 public universities to having 32 universities. That is a fact you will not hear on CNN. You will not hear on MSDNC. You will not hear on Fox News. You won't hear that. How about the fact that between 1999 and 2009, poverty and unemployment in Venezuela were cut in half? Can you imagine that? Poverty being cut in half. In just 10 years, they cut poverty in half by 50%. In neighborhoods across Venezuela, free health care is provided by Cuban doctors. The Bolivarian government has eradicated illiteracy in Venezuela. There is no illiteracy in Venezuela now. It is an illiteracy-free country, thanks to Cuban literacy volunteers that have been imported in. And across the country, modern housing and access to housing has been greatly expanded, with over 1 million modern housing units constructed, interest-free loans allowing Venezuelans to build their own homes. This is the basis. This is the basis of why the Venezuelan government has support. And they were reading that out loud. You can watch the video. They were reading this out loud, at the demonstration today. You'll never hear that. Oh, socialism just leads to people starving and being miserable. No, it leads to building huge universities. It leads to greatly expanding access to housing. It leads to wiping out illiteracy. It leads to free health care in communities that, all throughout the country that didn't have it. None of that ever gets talked about in American media. And here's the thing. They don't just not talk about it. They lie. They lie. They lie. They say, it's never worked. Socialism in Venezuela has never done any good thing. Ever since they had socialism in Venezuela, everyone's just been starving and miserable. False, 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 lies, 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 false, 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 false. In fact, the food problems started in 2014. Hugo Chavez was elected in 1998. It was in 2003 that they announced they were moving toward socialism. And the food problems, all these things that people attack Venezuela over, they all started in 2014. So the idea, socialism just causes people to starve. That's not true. Socialism built 20 universities. Socialism wiped out illiteracy. Socialism built cheap housing and made housing accessible for the population. Socialism brought health care to the population. Socialism cut poverty in half, and it cut unemployment in half. But you'll never hear any of that. But the problems that started in 2014, most of which were caused by U.S. sanctions. The USA prevented the country from being able to import food, put sanctions on the country, made it so they wouldn't have U.S. dollars to buy from food importers. Just attacked the country viciously. They've gone as far as like armed terrorist groups, La Salida, and the opposition groups. So the USA imposes a crisis in 2014, and that proves that the entire experience of Venezuelan socialism never happened, right? All those people that had houses, it didn't happen. All those people that, illiteracy wiped out, that didn't happen. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. And the anti-Venezuela folks, they just lie. They lie endlessly. And it is infuriating to me, the lying, because Venezuela has greatly benefited from socialism. Socialism in Venezuela has really had tremendous results, but you never hear about those tremendous results. And the problems that they're having now are largely imposed by the United States. They have grabbed Alex Saab, a diplomat who was trying to get food into the country. They've grabbed him and detained him, right? For daring to try and get food to his own people. And they do that, but somehow it's socialism's fault, that there's food shortages. It's pretty unbelievable. It's pretty unbelievable. Pretty unbelievable. But another known fact, in 2018, what country had the highest rate of GDP growth in all of South America? Oh, gee, it must have been a free market country, Caleb, because everybody knows that capitalism is the way that countries are raised out of poverty. Gee golly, Must be the most free market country than Venezuela in South America that had the highest GDP. Was it Colombia? They're U.S. aligned. Oh boy. Oh gee golly. Oh, I must have been Chile. Must have been Chile that had the highest rate. Oh boy. Gee golly. That's what it must have been. Oh ho 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 ho. Actually, the highest rate of GDP growth in all of South America in 2018 was in Bolivia. The government that was led by Evo Morales, a socialist government, had the highest rate of GDP growth. But do they ever bother to tell you that? No, they don't. No, they don't. When socialism has successes, they don't comment on it. They don't say, oh boy, look at the success of socialism. But when Venezuela has problems, it's all socialism's fault. This is how disingenuous and dishonest their narratives are. Basic economic data spits in the face of this free market neoliberal narrative we've all been fed our whole lives. Oh, if we just privatize everything, Caleb, it'll lead to everyone being wealthy. All the poverty in the world is caused by socialism. Socialism's never worked anywhere, gee golly. That's funny. How did 2018, did Bolivia have the highest rate of GDP growth? How come, Venezuela only had 12 universities and got 32 due to Hugo Chavez and socialism? Or how about this? 2006 was the year that the Sandinistas, the Marxist Christians who led the Nicaraguan Revolution of 1979, were reelected to run the government. Their construction projects and social programs resulted in poverty being reduced in Nicaragua by 30% from 2005 to 2014. 30% reduction in poverty due to the Sandinistas. Between 2007 and 2016, the GDP of Nicaragua has risen by 36%, according to the Wall Street Journal. Wow, a 36% increase in GDP in Nicaragua. But socialism never does anything. It never worked. Never anywhere has it ever done anything. Oh boy, and let's look at Nicaragua's neighbors, right? Clearly, if the free market is the answer, their neighbors that don't have those horrendous socialist policies, that don't have the evil Sandinistas in power, they must be doing great. Like, what about Honduras? How is Honduras working? How is Honduras working? Honduras, right? They have free market policies, and they are a mess of poverty and suffering, refugees fleeing to the United States. Oh, and how about Guatemala? How's Guatemala doing, right? Again, free market, libertarian policies, U.S.-aligned regime, they should be doing great. Oh, wait, but it's actually Nicaragua that is reducing poverty. It's Nicaragua that has wiped out illiteracy. And interestingly enough, in 2016, the World Happiness Index of the United Nations rated Nicaragua as having the highest increase of happiness of any country in the world. Wow. But I thought that socialism just makes everybody poor and free markets are what make people rich. But it looks like that Honduras, free market country, is poor and suffering. Guatemala, free market country, is poor and suffering. But Nicaragua, led by a socialist government that the USA has imposed sanctions on, the USA has armed terrorists and drug dealers to try and overthrow, the USA labels a dictatorship, even though the population there overwhelmingly supports them and votes for them, it's Nicaragua that is raising people out of poverty and has wiped out illiteracy. These are facts, folks. These are just facts. Okay? They're facts that they never bother to mention, right? And all these libertarians, they just want to get on there and they act like they're so smart. Oh, I read Supply and Demand. They never talk about... I'm just giving you basic data here from Latin America. Bolivia had the highest rate of GDP growth of any country in South America in 2018. Venezuela has built huge universities, 20 new universities. Illiteracy wiped out. The achievements are massive. In Nicaragua, the Citizens Power Councils and what's been achieved there. This is basic economic data. These are facts, folks. You don't have to go all the way back to Stalin in the 1930s. You don't have to talk about the 5-year plans. This is basic data that nobody bothers to talk about. Socialism has not failed as an economic system by any means. Libertarians are liars. They just lie, right? They just lie. My favorite libertarian argument, this is a great one. This is great. So China under Mao was poorer than China is today. So that proves that free markets are the solution to everything. Did you know that? China under Mao was poorer than China is today. So that proves we should have free markets, right? Geez, when I was in my bedroom, and it was cold, I turned my heater on. And that proves that I should go crash into the sun because clearly more heat is always the answer. Do you know how much state control there is in the Chinese economy? Do you know how many state-owned enterprises there are? Do you know that even private companies are not free to do what they want in China? The Communist Party can come in and tell them what to do. And in fact, do you know the biggest companies in China, like Huawei Technologies, are basically state-enforced monopolies that receive government subsidies? Did you know China has 5-year economic plans? Did you know that? Did you know the Chinese government spends millions of dollars, billions of dollars on roads and infrastructure and funding a state-controlled educational system and state-funded scientific research and state-funded high-speed railway and state, corporations to build the fastest trains in the world? I mean, but clearly, because China under Mao was poor, and then there were market reforms under Deng Xiaoping, that proves that we should just have libertarianism and privatize everything, right? Like I said, it was cold in my bedroom in the winter, so I adjusted my bedroom by turning the heat on, and I was more comfortable. So therefore, I should light my bedroom on fire, because more heat is always the answer. That's what that proves. China adjusted its socialist system. It adjusted its socialist system. It adjusted its socialist system in 1978 with the market reforms, and it's been continually adjusting its socialist system. And it adjusted its socialist system under Mao, and it adjusted its socialist system in the early 60s. The Chinese Communist Party has been constantly adjusting and changing its policies. But it has never been, since 1949, a free market economy. Never has the Chinese economy been a free market private economy. Not since 1949. You know when China was a free market economy? When the British Empire attacked China with the Opium Wars and forced them at the point of a gun, not once but twice, in 2 different Opium Wars. They forced China to adopt free market policies. The Chinese emperor wanted to impose tariffs on foreign commodities and build up Chinese industries. And the British Empire was so committed to Adam Smith's sociopathy, Adam Smith's psychopathy, right? This might is right, free market supremacism. They waged 2 opium wars to force China to adopt free market policies in the 1800s, and it devastated the country. It held back economic development, and it led to massive famines. There were famines over and over and over again. In the 1880s in China, there were famines and mass deaths of malnutrition. In the 1890s in China, there were famines and mass deaths of malnutrition. In the 1910s in China, there were famines and mass deaths of malnutrition. In the 1920s in China, there were famines and mass deaths of malnutrition. And in fact, Edgar Snow, the American journalist, was there, and he talked about how in 1928, there was a famine in China, and people were starving to death. And part of the reason that they were starving to death was because of the fact that the fields that should have been growing food were growing opium poppies. Why? Because the British Empire had brought opium into the country as a way to control the population. And that was the free market, right? Poor people didn't have money to buy food, but there was money to buy opium. And the free market was saying, hey, grow opium poppies, don't grow food. And people were starving. And Edgar Snow, the American journalist from St. Louis, Missouri, you can read about it in his book Red Star Over China. He was walking around. And saying, why don't the people rise up and revolt against this? How do they tolerate this, right? That's how the Chinese Communist Party emerged. There is endless amounts written about the Great Leap Forward and the economic famine in the early 60s in China. But nobody talks about the fact that it was the Chinese Communist Party that cured the famines of China. It was because of the Chinese Communist Party that China got mechanized modern agriculture. It's because of the Chinese Communist Party that China has a modern educational system and has wiped out illiteracy. It is because of the Chinese Communist Party that China is now the second largest economy in the world. I mean, the free marketeers, the believers in capitalism, are just so full of lies. Basic economic data contradicts their narrative. Their narrative is utter malarkey. It is utter malarkey. Capitalism does not lead to prosperity. And throughout the 1990s, free market neoliberal policies were imposed after the fall of the Soviet Union. They were imposed all across Eastern Europe. They were imposed onto Russia. Boris Yeltsin, who was, the U.S. government under the leadership of Bill Clinton, meddled in their election to get Boris Yeltsin elected president, and they imposed free market policies on Russia. And what was the result, right? Did Russia get wealthier? Did people? No, right? Eastern Europe became a center of sex trafficking, mass unemployment, poverty, drugs. It was a disaster. The 1990s were a disaster in Eastern Europe. And in Bolivia, where Jeffrey Sachs presided over the privatization of water resources. In Ecuador, where I actually witnessed as a 12-year-old a man-made famine created by neoliberal economic policies and the crash of the Asian markets in Ecuador in 1999. I saw this stuff when I was a kid. This is capitalism. Capitalism does not lead to prosperity. Capitalism does not lead to economic success. Free market libertarian policies destroy countries, and the United States is largely a result of that. Take a look at the United States. The United States, as we look at it right now, is the result of failed economic policies. We privatized our prisons. We privatized our roads. We've privatized our military. The infrastructure is falling apart. The power plants are in shambles. Water's not being properly purified. But hey, why do I invest in the public sector, right? That's communism, right? We can have a private company do it, right? If you can't see what's going on here, right? If you choose to continue to believe in this free market, politicized sociopathy, I pity you. I deeply, deeply pity you. All right. French and Italian communist resistance in World War II. Western fear of China rising as power driven by projection and assumption. Right. Oh, right. Of China. Assumption. Projection. Very good question, Aya. Just writing all of this down. But yes, there's basic economic data here that shows overwhelmingly that socialism has been successful as an economic system. That shows the failures of capitalism. There are many, many examples of this. And, people that buy into this capitalist free market logic, they tried hardest. Twitch. They try their hardest not to accept it, not to hear it. But these are facts. I am telling you basic facts here. What was China like before the Chinese Communist Party? What is China like now? What was Russia like before the Soviet Union? What is Russia like now? What was Russia like in the 1990s? How did Russia get out of it? The 1990s, Russia was economically devastated. They had free market policies. And then Putin came in and he pushed public control, state control of their oil and gas industries. Gazprom and Rosneft, like JBVs, what do they do? Gazprom and Rosneft, two state-controlled mega corporations were created. And, that is how, with state control over energy resources and central planning, that's how Putin was able to rescue Russia from the economic disaster of the 1990s. These are facts, folks. These are facts. Libertarianism does not work. Socialism has worked. It hasn't created utopia or heaven on earth, But it's worked. It's raised countries out of poverty. It's industrialized. It's wiped out illiteracy. It's brought access to modern housing and education to millions of people. I see these statistics. PragerU will make this video or make this post, and they'll say, well, capitalism is so great because hundreds of millions of people were lifted out of poverty in the last 40, 50 years. China is largely responsible for that. China has raised 800 million people out of poverty with its centrally planned, state-run economy. And on top of that, it's Chinese investment. All across the planet, Chinese investment that has done it, right? For example, in Brazil, there were whole areas of Brazil that didn't have access to electricity. Until recently, until the last decade or so. And why is that? Because under the leadership of Lula da Silva, the Social Democratic president from the Workers' Party, and Dilma Rousseff, also from the Workers' Party, China teamed up with the government of Brazil and built hydroelectrical power plants all over Brazil. And so there are regions of Brazil where people gained access to electricity and raised themselves out of poverty thanks to the Chinese Communist Party in Brazil. The Chinese state-controlled corporations built power plants in Brazil. So when, I mean, thank you. Thank you for the super chat. I mean, it's just beyond me. It's beyond me how these people can push this idea that, oh, capitalism is responsible for raising all these people out of poverty. Or socialism has never achieved anything. I mean, there's basic data here, folks. I mean, these facts speak for themselves. It's just they never choose to interpret the facts this way. And if you interpret facts this way, people look at you like you're crazy. And if you interpret facts in the libertarian way, everyone just nods. Everyone just nods and agrees with it, right? I mean, it's unbelievable. And on top of that, then they've created this atmosphere on the left where you're not allowed to talk about this. I'm sorry, I'm interested in economics, right? I don't think this is a struggle to create employee stock ownership programs. I don't think this is about calling people Nazis, making sure I think it's about economics, right? We need an economy that works in the interest of public good, not the profits of a few. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. That's what we need. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. That's what we need. We desperately need a government of action that will fight for working families. I have laid out a 4-point plan. Step 1 would be a mass mobilization to rebuild the country. Step 2 would be public control of our natural resources, so the profits from our natural wealth go into the public budget. Step 3 would be public control of our banking system. And step 4 would be an economic bill of rights, guaranteeing all citizens the right to housing, education, healthcare. That's what we need. We need an economic plan to rescue the country. And if you go to the website of the Center for Political Innovation, CPIUSA.org, you can very easily find out, about our economic plan to rescue the country. This is what is needed, right? We need a government of action that will fight for working families. We need to dismantle imperialism. We need to build a socialist society where the people come first. That is what we need. And if you look at the basic economic data, this is pretty apparent. It's only not apparent if you choose not to see it, right? And at university, trust me, they don't want you to see this. If you're just doing mainstream politics, nobody wants to admit it. But everything I just said about China and their role in eradicating poverty and their success and the level of state control there is true. Everything I said about Nicaragua and Venezuela and Bolivia is true. Everything I said about the fall of the Soviet Union is true. I mean, this is basic economic data. You want to read about the great free market coming to Western Europe, then I would encourage you to go read Philip Thayer's Europe Since 1989. Go read The Shock Doctrine by Naomi Klein, and that will show you what the results of imposing free markets on Europe was. And it will talk about how it was changed and how Putin reasserted state control over the economy. What would a socialist U.S. do with the country's casino industry? How would China? Right. All right. Casino industry. All right. And These are facts, right? If you want to see about the economic achievements of socialism, I would encourage you to read We Created Chavez by George Chicarello Mar. A very good book, A History of the Venezuelan Revolution. If you want to, learn about the achievements of socialism in Latin America, there are many places one could read about it. If you want to read about the achievements of socialism in China, you can read the China Wave, Rise of a Civilization State. These you can read When China Rules the World by Martin Jakes. I mean, these are factual assertions. This is just an economic conversation, and just basic economic data shows that no, socialism has not been a failure. It has had very big successes in eradicating poverty and unleashing economic growth. It's capitalism that is failing all over the world, and it's been since the imposition of neoliberal free market policies in the United States that we've been having this problem. Is also having great success with poverty reduction. All right, India. Poverty reduction. So there you go. I mean, I just wanted to lay out those facts for you. Not a big long opening speech tonight, but I just felt like talking about economics. Free Alex Saab, and yeah, I wanted to just talk about that. So now we'll do the roll call, names and locations. Let me call you out as I see you. Names and locations. Who's with us? Names and locations. Who's with us tonight? Names and locations. Who's with us? Nate in Chicago. Lucha in Jackson, Mississippi, Midwest, Io Hillary in New York City, shout out to you, Chaya in Montreal, Yo Chris in Philly, Kieran from San Diego, Canton, Ohio, we should talk, Northwest Indiana, Chad in Kansas City, Ryan in Oakland, Arturo in Alaska, Cameron Smith, the man in New Haven, Connecticut, St. Louis, Jenny Lynn in Ohio, Carolyn on Staten Island, repping Dario and Tomorrow, and I think you're a mod. All right, Elias in Wisconsin, Eva from Nashville, Tennessee, Soup Soap, or Soap Soup, there you go, Springfield, Missouri, West Virginia, Nate in Pano, Australia, Auckland, New Zealand, welcome, welcome, Mr. Auckland, New Zealand, Utah, Joe in Kalamazoo, Ian in Scotland, Austin, Texas, Joey of the John Brown Volunteers. Shout out to you, JBVs. You guys are killing it out there. You're killing it. You're doing great work. Ramiro in Los Angeles, good friend of the program. Shout out to you, Ramiro. Great guy, great friend of the show. Watch his documentary about Nicaragua. Watch his channel. He's doing great work over there. Vinicius from Brazil. Dylan Small, who I met out in California. Great guy. Detroit. Not going to disclose location. Does that make it an undisclosed location? Are you with where they took Dick Cheney during 9/11? Is that where you are? Is that the undisclosed location? Los Angeles, New York City, North Carolina, Tom in Minneapolis, Ben in Denver, Melbourne, Australia, Neil Fraser in Hong Kong, China. Shout out to you. Cleveland Pirate Alex, Mindanao, Midwest, Josh in Ontario, Dust James is in North Carolina, Lee County, Sam in Chicago. I think Sam, you can be a mod. Kendall in San Diego, Salt Lake City, Locked in Cheyenne Mountains, St. George in Utah. Ryan is out there. Shout out to you, Ryan. I met you in California as well. Shout out to you. Moosey the Moose in the Canadian forests. Oh, well, there you go. JT24 in Mississippi, unnamed city and state, Fort Lauderdale, Oakland. I've been to Oakland before. I was there right after the election of Donald Trump. Billings, Montana. David in China. Alan in Chicago is with us. Shout out to you, Alan in Chicago. Who else is with us? Don D in NYC, good friend of the program. Shout out to you, Don D. Who else is with us? Anyone else tonight? Anybody else? Ukiah, California. Corona, California. Space Communist. Very, very good. Very, very, very good. Norfolk, Virginia. Treasure Coast, Florida. From Louisiana. Very good. Very, very good. All right. Very, very, very good. Dan in Mexico City. Very, very good. All right, folks. All right. All right. Updating the meaning of liberal, red, brown, imperialist used to falsify anti-imperialism. How do we updating the meaning of liberal, red, brown, imperialist is used to falsify imperialism. How do we define to avoid it? Whoa, I'm not sure what that means. Updating meaning liberal, red, brown, imperialist. Define. All right. Very good. And there we go. There we go. My cadence reminds you of Louis C.K. Well, I think I also have red hair and a goatee like Louis C.K. I'm not bald though, you know. So that's a difference between me and Louis C.K. I also don't masturbate in front of people. That's a big difference between me and Louis C.K. I generally do not masturbate in front of people. So there you go. But I mean, people have said that before. But yes, we do have the same color hair. I would assume that we're both funny. But then again, I mean, I don't think I'm funny. And we both have a goatee. He has a goatee as well. But there you go. So now keep the super chats rolling in, and I will be happy to answer your questions. So yeah, I'll just start going through the super chats, and as they come in, we'll do more, and that'll be the second half of our show. All right, welfare statism. Is it the best way to stabilize capitalism? Austerity caused by hegemony. All right, is welfare statism the best way to stabilize capitalism? Not necessarily. I mean, it does make things more stable. However, welfare statism is very effective at stabilizing capitalism when there's already an abundance of profits. But austerity tends to be the result of when there is a falling rate of profit. There's less money, right? There's more money when there's a stronger economy. The height of the Keynesian welfare state was very much the post-World War II economic boom. The post-World War II economic expansion was when you had the height of the welfare state, because everyone had a lot of money. But as the economy declines, that's when you start to get austerity. On top of that, when it comes to the welfare state, and this is an important thing, the welfare state was very much something that emerges as a result of a level of Bonapartism, right? Every capitalist wants the economy to be more stable, but they want the other capitalists to be the ones to pay for it, right? And it was really a result of class struggle. If there had not been a Soviet Union, there never would have been a European welfare state post-World War II. It was because of the strength of communist parties coming out of the Second World War. It was because of the strength of labor unions. It was because of the alternative of the Soviet Union existing that Britain created a national health service, that France vastly expanded its welfare state. I mean, the welfare states that emerged were very much a product of the fear of communist revolution and huge communist groups and organizations existing throughout the country. Is austerity caused by hegemony? Well, they're always trying to drive down, to get away with maximizing their profits and providing as little for the population as they can, right? Now, hegemony enables them to do it because they're not competing. They weren't competing with the alternative of communism. Communist parties and organizations were weaker. The labor movement was weaker, etc. So I guess you could say that was part of it. But at the end of the day, the capitalist always wants to maximize the profits, right? That's what they always want. So there you go. Is capitalism capable of stabilizing itself at all at this point, besides the intensification of exploitation and imperialist adventurism? Capable of stabilizing. Alrighty. Next question. What is the problem of treating communism as cultural and removing economics? Well, the problem with that is that the essence of Marxism is economics, right? I mean, Marxism is an economic worldview, right? It seeks to change property relations. It traces history through the evolution of various modes of production. And if you make Marxism simply cultural, it becomes a vehicle through which you can interpret works of art. You can argue that art reflects certain class interests, but it doesn't really empower you to do very much. And even those class interests that it's reflecting, for example, what are those class interests? What are those classes? What do those classes want? What is in the interest of those classes, right? A lot of this cultural criticism that they call Marxism, it's like they think it's Marxism if you say capitalism is bad. They think it's Marxism if you say capitalism is bad. They think it's Marxism if you say racism exists. They think it's Marxism if you say imperialism and the legacy of colonialism exists. You can say all of that without being a Marxist. There was criticism of capitalism long before Marx was around. In fact, the first critics of capitalism were, the feudal hierarchy, the feudal structure, the Roman Catholic Church. They criticized capitalism as it was emerging and opposed it. And there was feudal anti-capitalism that existed. So that's just being critical of capitalism, and that's what a lot of this Marxist cultural criticism is. They say, oh, art is mass produced to make profit. Well, that's kind of Marxist, but there's nothing inherently Marxist about that. You're criticizing art and culture because it's over commercialized. You don't have to. If Marx had never lived, people would have said that. There's nothing particularly Marxist about saying that. And then you say, well, this work of art reflects, the history of groups that have suffered from colonialism. Well, again, that's kind of Marxist, because Marx, in Capital, he talks about colonialism, and Lenin has his theory of imperialism. But again, we would have had to deal with the legacy of colonialism, even if Marx and Lenin had never existed. Colonialism existed, and so talking about how it impacts art and the art of particular communities, the music, you talk about how jazz, for example, is influenced by the legacy of slavery in the United States, and the ghettoization of the African American community, and segregation, and in the way black people were allowed to be entertainers, but were not allowed into other aspects of American life. And again, there's a lot of cultural Marxist critics who make that analysis. I don't know what's particularly Marxist about that. That's just, again, if you're going to analyze black art and you're acknowledging the history of black oppression, is that necessarily Marxist? A lot of what they call Marxist cultural criticism is it's left-wing cultural criticism. It's not blatant propaganda, I guess, right? It's not you are acknowledging the problems of capitalism. You're acknowledging the problems and the legacy of colonialism and imperialism and economic injustice and such, and its impact on art. But not all of that is necessarily Marxist, right? And that's the thing. And I've noticed that a lot of academic Marxism is whenever you vaguely start to criticize the structure of Western capitalism, they think they're being Marxist then. And no, Marxism is a very specific worldview. It's the struggle of the bourgeoisie against the proletariat. It's the drive of humanity toward a higher mode of production. It's the goal of creating socialism and eventually laying the basis for the higher stage of communism with vast material abundance. If you read the Critique of the Goethe Program, that's Marxism. Read Socialism, Utopian and Scientific by Friedrich Engels. That's Marxism. And this kind of vague left criticism of society is not Marxism. Marxism is a very specific worldview, understanding the capitalist mode of production, understanding the struggle of the proletariat to seize control of the means of production, and a lot of this stuff. And thank you, Tusker. I'm really glad you liked the conversation with Sabi. I really enjoyed that conversation as well. It was a really good conversation. It looks like it was really, really great, and I'm really glad. And you should go check it out. And Sabi Sobs of Fred Hampton Leftists is very amazing. We just had a great conversation. But yeah, there's a lot of this stuff that isn't necessarily Marxist. And again, if you take the struggle to seize control of the means of production, the economic class struggle, if you take that out of Marxism, what is it then? What is it? It's just a way to criticize. It's a vehicle for deconstruction. It takes apart the myths of this society, which is good, but if you don't replace those myths with anything, it's just kind of and that's Marxism does that, right? For example, right, this is how Marxism is useful. Marxism shows that there is not an eternal family structure. Did you know that? Right? Generally, we used to believe widely that there was just one natural way the family is, the nuclear family, one man, one woman, and their children. That was just the natural way Well, thanks, Lily. I'm sorry you're having to deal with that. But, that's just the natural way things are. Well, it's not just the natural way things are, right? Originally, for the majority of human existence, there was no institution of marriage. There were hunter gatherers and tribes, and they didn't even keep track of whose kid was whose kid. Everyone just kind of had sex with who they felt like having sex with, and they were all one big family in the tribe. Well, when the origins of agriculture developed and some land was more productive than others, you had to keep track of whose land was whose and whose kid was whose kids, because who inherited the land. And so you got the institution of marriage and the origins of patriarchy. You got that with the origins of private property. And at that point, there was an institution called marriage. There was an institution called the family, but it was very different, right? Originally, it was a man and all of his wives, multiple wives, polygamy, and all of his children and all of his slaves and servants. It was a man's household was his familia, right? I believe that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's Latin. In Roman Latin, they referred to, a familia was like the total of everything a man owned, including all of his slaves and all of his children and all of his wives. That was right. So that was the idea. Since CPI branches and study groups are popping up in every state, how do you plan to handle dirty actors infiltrating the group or creating one to deviate? All right. Dirty actors in CPI? Question mark. All right. Handle. All right. There you go. All righty. So that's so Marxism shows there's not an eternal way the family is, right? We now have, there's monogamy, and now we have gay marriage, right? And that the family is constantly changing. There's not an eternal structure of what the family is. Marxism shows that, and it rips to shreds the mythology that there is one sacred way. So it's a vehicle for deconstruction. So that would be useful to, a cultural critic or a postmodernist. They say, aha, this myth that there is just one eternal way the family is, Marxism rips it to shreds. Okay, good. What is another myth of this society, right? That the rich people, they all just worked really, really hard to get where they are. Well, Marxism actually comes along and shows that many of the rich people inherited their wealth, and that by owning the means of production, they're accumulating the value that other people are creating, that workers work very hard, and the harder they work, the poorer they get, and meanwhile, the capitalist, does the least amount of work and has the most wealth. So Marxism shows that actually the ruling class live at the expense of other people. And it's those who work the hardest that have nothing, and it's those who do the least amount of work that have everything under capitalism. So that's, again, a cultural critic or a postmodernist can say, oh, wow, there's Marxism is helpful. It deconstructed a myth, right? Marxism deconstructs the myth that the West is the best. And we're taught all of this, right? That in the West, in Western America, Western societies, the United States, we believe in freedom and human rights. And all these peoples throughout the world, they do not believe in our civilized Western concepts. They're just more backward. Well, Marxism shows that freedom in any society is related to economic development. And furthermore, that if you look throughout the history of the West, when we were less economically developed and when we were less stable, we were less free. And as we're becoming less stable as a society, and as we're becoming less economically developed, we're becoming less free. You'll notice, right? The height of American civil liberties was the late 1960s, right? You have Supreme Court rulings, but now, with our, the war on terror and Guantanamo Bay and government wiretapping and police brutality, as U.S. society is deteriorating, we're becoming less free because freedom is directly related to material economic conditions, right? Grassroots crowd-funded lobbying, all right. Crowd-funded lobbying. And that this is directly related to material conditions, right? So, again, it rips apart one of the myths that is the basis for Western chauvinism. Again, that's useful to a cultural critic. But all of this, if it's just deconstruction, right? If all Marxism does is give people the ability to say, you're lying, You're wrong. All it's doing is ripping apart the myths, but it's not replacing them with any truths. All it leads to is the belief that the world is just full of lies. Right? You're not replacing it with truths. You're deconstructing the ideology of this society. You're deconstructing the mythology of the nuclear family. You're deconstructing the mythology of the capitalists are the ones who work the hardest. You're deconstructing the mythology that the West is the best. Okay. But you're not replacing it with anything. If you're not saying, and the answer is the workers should rise up and seize control of the means of production. You're not saying all of these, realities are rooted in economics. You're not saying the goal is to get to a higher state of material abundance, to lay the basis for eradicating the state. If you never say any of that, what good are you doing? Again, you're deconstructing, but you're not replacing it with anything. It's not really a danger, and it just leads to a state of confusion and apathy. Right? And if you read the Search for the Manchurian Candidate, this was how the CIA figured out was most effective to fight communism, right? That it was most effective to fight communism to create a state of moral relativism and confusion. Rather than telling people that we have the truth and the communists are liars, rather than that, just say there is no truth. Rather than tell people that that our United States is the greatest country in the world, and the communists are they are evil. Rather than doing that, say there is no truth, there is no greatest country in the world, there is no good or evil. Everything's just a matter of opinion, and that leads to this de-escalation where no one feels passionate about anything, and the rulers of society as it currently exists can hold on to their power, and everything can just sort of fall apart and go to shit, which is what the Eastern establishment wants, right? They want the world to be poorer. They want, to stay at the top of the pyramid. And so they, everyone's got to have less. And so that's what they're doing. If you look at Netflix, if you look at the social engineering that goes on, I'm going to have to do a rant. I'm not ready. I have a rant in my head about Netflix. I have got a rant in my head about Netflix. I'm not ready to do it yet, but I've got something to tell you all about Netflix pretty soon, but I'm not sure I'm ready to do it. But when I'm ready, you'll know. You'll hear it. Trust me, I stream plenty. Reading through City Builders, I feel it's a lefty book that can share with right-wing friends. Just commenting for the super chat. Well, thank you, Tusker. It was intended to make these ideas accessible to people. Thank you very much, Tusker. All right. But yeah, that's the problem, and that's a good question from Chaya. The problems of removing economics from Marxism and making it just a cultural criticism. All right. Your professor said that Stalin's rule was a continuation of Peter the Great. Okay, well, this is one of those things where there's there's a grain of truth in that, right? And you'll notice that during World War II, there were a lot of films about Alexander Nevsky and Ivan the Terrible. There were a lot of films during World War II glorifying the czars who fought invaders and such, and that there was kind of an attempt to revive Russian national pride, right? The Bolsheviks, when they first came to power, weren't into that kind of thing, but especially during the Stalin era, there was an attempt to revive civilizational and cultural aspects of it. Go and watch Ivan the Terrible. It's a great movie. Sergei Eisenstein's Ivan the Terrible is a very good movie. And there was an element of truth in what your professor said, but they're kind of missing the point, right? I think that they're probably arguing that there were aesthetic and cultural ways that Stalin was admired that are historical throughout Russia's history, going back to Peter the Great, that there has been a struggle in that part of the world to keep those countries united so they can be economically developing together, and Stalin was continuing that struggle to unify the countries of that region, in the Soviet Union and the surrounding countries, to unify them so they could economically develop together, and Peter the Great was struggling to do that as well. Perhaps that's what they're hinting at, but at the end of the day, right, Peter the Great, that was feudalism, right? And the Soviet Union was building a socialist, centrally planned economy with industrialization. So it was vastly different. And the role of women in society under Stalin was vastly different. The technological level was vastly different. The role of national minorities. I mean, the Soviet Union really worked very, very hard to, cultivate the languages of Ukrainians and Moldovans and other, other nationalities that historically had not had their own language and their own culture. So, I mean, he may be hinting at some kind of cultural truth. There may be truth in what he's saying, but he's missing the forest for the trees. You know, the truth in what he is saying is kind of, and this is a common thing in anti-communist literature. They look for stuff like that, again, overlooking all the important things, right? I mean, it's like, you know, you can take a class on Russian history and they will just gloss over the fact that the Soviet Union was deeply poor, and with Stalin it became a global industrial superpower that saved the world from fascism. But that's not like important, right? The important thing is this slide of a gulag and some starving children. Now that's what's important, right? It's like lying through emphasis. All the achievements of socialism don't matter, and then 2 minutes later, you know, they say it never worked anywhere, even though there's vast economic achievements. I mean, this is how they lie about communism. It's lie through emphasis, lie through omission, right? All the achievements don't count for anything. We just repeat these, you know, this claim that it never worked economically, even though the data is right there in front of your face. So there you go. All right. Xi Jinping's leftward shift. Well, you'll notice that Jiang Zemin, who was the leader of China during the 1990s, said that China eventually wanted to adopt the Western system. I don't know if folks know that, but actually, Jiang Zemin did say that the goal of the Chinese Communist Party was to adopt a Western-style system, basically, and that there was probably a current in the Chinese Communist Party at that time that felt that way. If Jiang Zemin said that, that probably meant that there were a lot of people in the party who felt that way. That is not the feeling of the Chinese Communist Party anymore, right? It's very clear President Xi Jinping does not want to adopt the Western system, right? And is very much an adherent of Marxism-Leninism. Fidel Castro gave a glowing endorsement to Xi Jinping before he died. And said that, you know, that Fidel Castro said that Xi Jinping was one of the most competent revolutionary leaders he'd ever met, one of the most effective revolutionary leaders that he'd ever met. And that's pretty important. So, you know, that's something to keep in mind. But yes, the mass line campaign and the crackdown on corruption, that was a big part of it. Moving against bribery, moving against politicians who take bribes. Another big part has been reviving communist culture and teaching about communism and cracking down on the universities. You know, every university in China is required to give communist political classes. But in some of these Western universities, in their communist political class, they would watch 1984 and have a conversation about totalitarianism and how China's moving away from totalitarianism. They would just be teaching Western propaganda. They don't do that anymore. Now they teach, you know, Marxism. And that in a lot of ways, there were many areas of China where there was so much admiration for Western capitalism that all the communist aspects were just kind of being watered down. And you can see that, and I mean, if you talk to folks who've been from China, there were regions where it seemed like the communist part was just being watered down. And then the culmination of this was, you had Chongqing and Shanghai. Shanghai was implementing more and more free market policies and watering the communism down more and more and more. And Chongqing, under the leadership of Bo Xilai, was implementing, a lot of like hardline communist policies, and that was kind of creating room for Bo Xilai to become this like very authoritarian, like Bonapartist figure. So you had the fall of Bo Xilai. Bo Xilai was put on trial for corruption, was eventually for the murder of a British diplomat or something like that. It was pretty intense. All right, CPC Evergrande. It was very intense. But then after that, you had the rise of Xi Jinping. And Xi Jinping showed a documentary. Every party member watched a documentary about the crimes of U.S. imperialism. They watched another documentary about the fall of the Soviet Union and how the Soviet Union fell, and there was not a shot fired, and how could this have happened? And they shifted China leftward. China is moving in a more revolutionary and anti-imperialist direction. The Chinese Communist Party is moving toward much more assertion of its socialist principles, and the fact that there is centralized leadership under Xi Jinping, the fact that that books, that they're publishing Xi Jinping's writings, the Governance of China Volume 1, the Governance of China Volume 2, the Governance of China Volume 3, the fact that they're publishing this stuff, and there's chapters with names like Mao Zedong thought should be central in all things. This is a huge development, right? China is moving in a more left-wing and anti-imperialist and revolutionary direction. Probably the main motivating factor is the fact that the imperialists are attacking China so viciously. The imperialists cannot tolerate China's continued growth, especially since the pandemic. It is infuriating to them that China keeps expanding, that China keeps growing, that entities like Huawei Technologies are, they can't stand this. And because the imperialists cannot stand this, as a result of that, China is facing more attacks, and so China is being forced to return to its revolutionary roots. You can't love the United States if the United States is attacking you and trying to destroy you. So there you go. All right. All right. The French and Italian communist resistance during World War II. Una mattina, ba ba da da da. And bella ciao, bella ciao, bella ciao, 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 da 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 da. All right, Bella Ciao. You ever hear that song? A very famous communist song. It comes from the partisan brigades of Italy. In Italy, during the fall of the fascist regime, the Italian partisan brigades they fought against Mussolini and the fascists. They were armed communist resistance groups all throughout Italy, and they sang Bella Ciao. That was one of their themes. It means goodbye, beautiful, right? And the guy is saying goodbye to his girlfriend or his love. It's a very dark song. Da 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 da. And Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, Bella Ciao, 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 da 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 da. Yeah, and it's a particularly dark song, but it was about communist resistance to the Italian fascists, and it was like open warfare. The partisan brigades controlled big chunks of the country. It was like, they were like a dual power structure in Italy towards the end of the war. In France, you had La Resistance, right, and that was communists in France that were, resisting and fighting against the Nazis. And after the Second World War was over, the French Communist Party surged in membership. So yeah, these things happened. That's definitely. And everyone used to know about this. The USA actually had to have Operation Gladio to prevent the Italian Communist Party from winning the elections in Italy. Read about Operation Gladio and how the CIA meddled in Italy's elections nonstop to make sure the communists didn't win. So there you go. Yes, that's definitely reality, what you're talking about. Is the fear of China assumption and projection? I see so many articles in which they describe exactly what the United States has done in country after country after country. Can you chat to share the favorite pro-communist movies and documentaries? All right. All right. Favorite pro-communist movies, documentaries. And I've read so many articles, where they're talking about things that the United States has done over and over and over again. In Latin America, with the debt traps, the IMF and the World Bank, and their adjustment loans and the neoliberal policies. And they describe exactly, and then it's like, we suspect maybe China might possibly do this. Aren't you angry? And it's like, what? Right? Let's just go over the facts here. Russia has 9 overseas military bases. China has 1 overseas military base. It's in the African country of Djibouti. The United States has over 800 overseas military bases. Let me go over that one more time. Russia has 9 overseas military bases. China has 1 overseas military base. And the United States has over 800 overseas military bases. Who's the threat to world peace here? Just saying. China's going to take over the world with their 1 military base. They're going to take over the world by building trains, building high-speed railway, and building schools and hospitals and power plants. You want to talk about projection. Look at the results of China trading with countries. Look at the results of the United States trading with countries. China builds up the public sector of countries, lays the basis for the expansion of the domestic economy, whereas the United States goes into countries and strips the public sector away, demolishes the domestic economy. Um, so there you go. There you go. Would I consider streaming on Twitch? Sure, I would consider it. I mean, I'm open to it. I haven't. Eventually, I'm sure YouTube is going to give me more trouble than they give me now. I think I'm like shadow banned. I think I don't show up in people's notifications as much and such. But we shall see. I mean, right now we're doing this. But I've been thinking about Rockfin, but I'm a little. I've heard Rockfin pays in bitcoins. And I'm not sure I want to do that. I'm not sure if I'm ready to be a cryptocurrency guy or not. That's a concern I have about Rockfin, but I'm open to Rockfin. I'm not sure I'm ready to be a crypto guy. But so there's that. I'm looking at Rockfin, looking at Twitch. I mean, eventually, like I said, eventually they're not going to have us on here. Eventually we're going to get demonetized or something like that. They're not going to let this go on for too much longer, but I'm going to keep going. I'm going to keep going, and this seems to be working out okay for now. So we'll see how these things develop. Alrighty. What are the John Brown Volunteers, and what do they do? The John Brown Volunteers are a full-time outreach team of volunteers that have dedicated their time and their life to being full-time outreach activists and organizers. They go around New York City area right now, handing out palm cards and distributing buttons and doing outreach with the public. They go to demonstrations. They make social media content. They do a lot of different stuff. I mean, they're out in the parks promoting socialism, handing out palm cards, handing out buttons. They have public speak outs. That they had a rally in Union Square around 9/11. They went and they helped facilitate the 10-year anniversary of Occupy Wall Street celebrations. What else do they do? Today they were out. They attended a protest around Alex Saab. You can watch the video of that. Free Alex Saab. And the idea is that they will be dispatched to other cities. Right now, they're here in the New York City area. And it's a struggle. I mean, they're getting housing in order. I mean, it's very much a struggle to keep their housing in order. Any financial support you can offer to the John Brown Volunteers is deeply appreciated. I don't want to be a broken record, but, I may be repeating myself too much, and you may be tired of hearing me say that. But anyone who can shoot them some money on Cash App, just $ John Brown Volunteers, or on Venmo at the John Brown Volunteers, or you want to send it to my PayPal, just PayPal me, calebmaupin@gmail.com. The money that I get from Patreon, the money that I get from these streams, a lot of it is going to just fund the John Brown Volunteers because it is very difficult to keep it going. But this is how you maintain a real organization, is when you have cadre, right? The John Brown Volunteers are cadre, right? They are full-time, right? They are professional revolutionaries, right? And you need that, right? People contribute in different ways, and I've talked about this a lot on different streams, but everyone has a different way of contributing. There are some people that can contribute by doing online activism, and that is deeply appreciated. Everyone who posts videos, everyone who helps promote our books online, all that's very valuable, and it's deeply appreciated. Some people can contribute by helping make content online. Some people can contribute by being in the streets and helping build demonstrations. Some people can contribute by doing writing and all of that. Some people are able to make financial contributions, and that is deeply appreciated. And other people are able to become cadre. And these John Brown Volunteers, I was cadre for years. In the Workers' World Party, I was cadre. It was my full-time job. I had other jobs here and there, but it was the main thing I did. My main job was being a communist, right? And we need that. We need cadre, right? We need people. There's a lot of younger folks now who don't have a lot going on, right? They might be going to community college. They might have a service sector job they don't like. Well, we need those folks to say, you know what? I am going to step up to the plate. I'm going to choose a life that matters. I'm going to become a John Brown volunteer, and I am going to, work with the John Brown volunteers, and they've done it. One of these John Brown volunteers, he sold his PlayStation, sold his Pokemon cards, came up to New York. Another John Brown volunteer graduated from high school, got in his pickup truck, drove to New York City. And it's difficult to maintain them. It is very difficult to keep it going. They're struggling, but they are dedicated to this, right? This is what we need. And cadre, people who give their whole life to this. Those are the people that are going to be at the center of any kind of revolution. The transition towards socialism. It's going to be the cadre. Those are going to be the people that ultimately will be at the center of such struggles. They hold it together, right? They will be the core at the center of a very broad movement involving all kinds of different people. So I'm very excited about the John Brown volunteers and the work that they're doing. People see them in the parks, people recognize them, people see them at demonstrations, and they're good folks. They're good people. They're good people. You know what? And not everyone can do it. It's not for everybody, right? Not everyone can do it. And some people might be able to do it for a while. They may have to stop. And some people may be able to do it for life and just be a life cadre. And that's fine too, right? And I want to facilitate helping them do it. I mean, and the financial support is really, really appreciated. And they are building an organization, and they are figuring out ways to make it sustainable. And we're expanding. I mean, I just got an email today from somebody who wants to join the John Brown Volunteers. Now, I would like to make that happen. I would like to make that happen. I'm going to be in touch with this person. I think they've already been in touch with some of the John Brown volunteers. But, logistically, it may be difficult. But that's the whole thing. We're trying to make it happen. In order to have an organization, you need different kinds of people. You need different roles for people to play. And one of those roles that any serious organization is going to have, any serious political, think tank or movement is going to have, is they're going to have cadre, people who give their full-time effort to it. And so we do have John Brown volunteers. And if you are interested in becoming a John Brown volunteer, please contact me or contact one of the John Brown volunteers. Let's make it happen. And if you're interested in helping out the John Brown volunteers to do their everyday work, because I meet with them every day. I sit down with them every day around lunchtime near my office. I can't bring them to my office because of COVID restrictions and such, but I meet with them somewhere near my office every day. And it's a meeting, and we have a staff meeting every day. We have a little staff meeting, and we usually read some of the educational manual. We do like a reading session, and we talk business, and we talk about finances, and we talk about activism, and we talk about what we're doing. We have a staff meeting that goes on. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should make a little reality TV piece, a day in the life of the John Brown volunteers, like a reality TV show or something. But no, I mean, we have a staff meeting every day at lunchtime. They go out and they hit the streets. We have a closing out meeting, usually in the evening before I go home. We sit down and we talk about how the day went. We summarize things. That's what we do. And it's not easy, but they're getting better at it. They're getting better at going out there and engaging with people. You learn by doing, and that's a really important part of Mao Zedong and his teachings. He said, if you want to know what a pear tastes like, you've got to bite into it. And that is very true, right? You learn by doing. Knowledge comes through correct, practical experience. And that's what these John Brown volunteers are getting. And it's very valuable because I can see their ability to publicly speak, their ability to interact with people, their sensibilities have gotten better. They have learned from a lot of their experiences. I'm deeply proud of all the work that they're doing. I deeply love them for what they're doing, and I'm excited to see the John Brown volunteers expand. Wouldn't it be great if we had 40, 50, maybe 100 John Brown volunteers? Wouldn't it be great if there were John Brown volunteer groups in multiple cities at once, right? If there was a John Brown volunteer group in New York and one in Chicago, and instead of having to dispatch our team to different cities, wouldn't it be great? Wouldn't it be great if we had a John Brown volunteers team in like 5, 6 different cities all at once, doing outreach, recruiting new people, building the Center for Political Innovation, having reading groups, etc. There you go. Good stuff. All righty. All right. What would socialism do about the casino industry? Well, here's the thing, right? And you talked about China having casinos. That's up to China to determine, right? You could have, having the existence of casinos or the non-existence of casinos has nothing to do with socialism, right? I mean, a socialist society could have them, and a socialist society could not have them. But I will give you my opinion. This is my personal opinion, right? You can China can be socialist and have casinos, or but I personally am against casinos. I think casino gambling is bad. I think casinos are bad. I am opposed to casinos, right? The reason I'm opposed to casinos is because it is addictive. Number one, um, it is exploitive of people, and it doesn't encourage the best behavior. The way to achieve things in this world is by building. It's going out and building, and yes, that involves taking risks. Yes, that involves, you know, not knowing the results. But the way the casinos do it, right? Casino gambling, you know, I mean, what if you win at the poker table? What have you built? What have you accomplished, right? I mean, what if you win at the one-armed bandit, the slot machine? What have you accomplished, right? We need to get out of the idea that money can be created from other money. We need to get out of the idea that things in the world are just it's luck of the draw, right? We need to get out of that. We really need to get out of that, right? That we need to get the idea that wealth comes from human labor. That's really where wealth comes from, is from human labor and human creativity and nature, right? Labor creates all wealth. Labor and nature create all wealth. And gambling kind of takes people away from that. It takes advantage of people financially, but it also feeds into this idea that wealth just comes out of nowhere, right? You rolled the dice right on the craps table, and there's the wealth. Well, no, I mean, no, wrong. I mean, no, that wealth that you're getting represents the labor of workers, and the products that you're buying with the dollars you might win represents the labor of workers, right? I mean, no, I mean, wealth doesn't just appear. It doesn't just appear. Gambling kind of cultivates a mindset where people think like capitalists. And on top of that, it gets people away from the notion that they could go out and build something, right? They could go out and construct something. And I mean, it's very negative, and it introduces a negative atmosphere into society. I'm opposed to gambling. I don't gamble, you know. My wife, sometimes she'll buy one of those scratch lottery tickets. I don't do that. I wish she wouldn't do that. I don't think it brings good energy into the home. But, I'm not going to tell my wife what to do, right? It's not a patriarchal relationship. But no, I don't believe in the lottery. I don't believe in the lottery. I think they should tax the rich to pay for schools, right? I don't believe in the lottery. I don't believe in scratch and sniff. I don't believe in, I'll tell you this, every poor city in the United States, Pittsburgh, Detroit, Cleveland, every poor city in the United States, the city's falling apart economically. All the people are losing their jobs. All of a sudden, they get this brilliant idea. We'll save the economy by building a big, giant casino. I mean, haven't you heard many, many parts of the country this happens, right? They say, we're going to save the country by building a big, giant casino. We're going to save the city. The city's going to be rescued economically by building a big, giant casino. And they did it in Cleveland, and they did it in Detroit, and they did it in Pittsburgh, and they did it in Chicago, and they've done it in so many places. We're going to save the city. We're going to build a big, giant casino. And what happens? Nothing. I mean, it actually sucks money out of the community. It doesn't save the economy. Casinos do not save the economy. They tend to make it worse. It makes it worse. Unfortunately, a lot of the labor unions fight very hard for casinos, right? And that the labor unions, they make a deal that when the casino comes, it'll be, the Teamsters union will be part of it. And so then the Teamsters union will campaign like hell, send all of its people out like hell to, campaign for the legalization of gambling in the area and all of that. And then the unions often convince people that casinos are good, right? And that's one of the negative aspects of the labor movement, right? If the labor bureaucracy were more interested in unionizing Walmart than in than in legalizing casinos, I think we'd be in a better place. But the labor bureaucracy doesn't like to take risks. They want to make backroom deals. And that's a shoe-in, right? Oh, we get casino gambling legalized in this area, and then you'll let us have union dues from all the employees there. All right, we'll do it. That's labor fakery. That is what is it? That is the cloakmakers union. The cloakmakers union is a no good union. It's a company union by the bosses. Those right-wing cloakmakers, they are socialist fakers who play upon the workers' double crosses. The Hillquit Stubinskys and the Thomases, they making the workers false promises. They preach socialism, but they practice fascism to preserve capitalism for the bosses. That is not real labor. That is labor fakery, right? When unions become the champions of casinos, they should be champions of working class people. Anyway, India is having great success with poverty reduction. I not anywhere near what China's doing. I mean, look at the rates of poverty in India. Look at the rates of illiteracy in India. I mean, there have been some areas of India that have seen prosperity. A lot of that is Russian investment, Chinese investment. I mean, the Soviet Union built steel mills in India. Did you know that? A lot. I mean, not all of that necessarily comes from free market capitalism. I mean, there's a whole area in India called Kerala, that is controlled by the communists that did the best job fighting COVID. So it's not that simple, but sure. Sure. I mean, is it possible? There you go. Getting tired. Update the meaning of liberal, red, brown, and imperialism. Define. Okay. Well, liberalism is a philosophy that puts individualism above all else. It comes out of the bourgeois revolutions to overturn capitalism. Casinos are totally destructive. It's speculation on working class hopes. Exactly, Tusker. Exactly. Um, you know. Liberalism is a school of thought that emphasizes the rights of the individual, and human rights, etc. It comes out of the French Revolution. That's what liberalism is. Reds are leftists. Browns refers to fascists and the far right. Imperialism is a global economic system that Lenin defined in his book Imperialism, the highest stage of capitalism. It's capitalism in its monopoly stage. There you go. And yeah, I mean, I guess, BreadTube redefines it. And if you want to learn how BreadTube is wrong, read BreadTube Serves Imperialism. And I'll tell you all about how they've redefined these concepts and gotten them wrong. What are your thoughts about the assertion that Kautsky ended up supporting World War I because he did not want to be forced out of the party bureaucracy and lose his position? All right. Kautsky. Support War One. Alrighty. Is capitalism capable of stabilizing? Well, not completely, but Bonapartism is certainly possible. Mass wars and destruction is certainly possible. A more authoritarian state in order to drive down living standards, and yes, fascist methods are possible in stabilizing capitalism for a little while, but they're not a permanent solution. They're a temporary solution. They don't resolve the problem. They're a very temporary solution. Very, very temporary solution. But yeah, I can see Bonapartist maneuvers being used to to adjust the capitalist economy and make it more stable. I can definitely see that happening. Um, but it wouldn't be permanent, right? The problem of overproduction and the long-term economic crisis resulting from the computer revolution, that's not going away anytime soon. But some kind of Bonapartist maneuvering, if some faction were able to build up enough support to force its will upon the rest of the ruling class in society, that could lead to a couple years of boom, possibly, right? The Nazis were able to do that. The first little bit, from like 1933 up until 1939. That's not that long. It was about 6 years, but with mass destruction and terror and authoritarianism, the Nazis were able to reboot the German economy. But then that led to World War II, right? Louis Bonaparte, through his Bonapartism, he was able to stabilize French society up until the 1870s. In the war. These things. It is possible. Um, you know, Dirty actors in CPI. How do you handle them? Well, I'm not going to tell you that on here because then every dirty actor who wants to come into the CPI will just watch this stream and take notes and be able to maneuver around my strategy, right? Olympia, come on. Come on. I'm not going to reveal on this stream my very effective, dirty actor removal mechanism. I'm being facetious, but no, in all honesty, every so often it's already happened. There's been people that come around that, they're not really right for the group, and that happens. Occasionally you'll get somebody who, they come around and, they're just not right for the group. They don't agree with the organization. I mean, I mean, obviously, like we, for all of our retreats, we're very clear. If you come in and you're talking about violence, you're out of there, right? We do not tolerate any discussion of left adventurism. And if there's any provocateurish stuff, it won't be tolerated. If everyone signs, when they come in, it's on the agreement that there will be no discussion of left adventurist violence, terrorism, illegal activities. So if somebody walks in and they're saying, "Oh, why don't we blank blank blank?" Well, they're getting out of there. They're done. They're out of there. We don't tolerate that. We don't tolerate that. There is no tolerance for left adventurism, right? That's one thing. We're a legal organization. If you're doing illegal things at our events, you know, you're not welcome, right? I mean, we assume we're being watched heavily by law enforcement. I'm sure we are, right? And by other people. We're being watched by a lot of people, not just law enforcement. So if you're coming around and you're doing illegal shit, you got to get out of there, right? We're not an illegal organization. We're a legal think tank trying to introduce socialism and anti-imperialism into the broader conversation. That's what we do. We're an educational think tank. We're not aligned with any party. We are engaging in socialist education, and people are welcome to come around. But if they're doing illegal things, they got to go. They got to go. And if they're, you know, talking about doing illegal things, they got to go. And, like I said, occasionally there will be individuals who come around. And, I mean, there are times where people, again, any group is a negotiation. You're going to be constantly negotiating how to do things. And we constantly, after we have an event, we talk about how well did it go? What could we have done differently? That's how a healthy organization works. So yeah, there you go. All right. Um, there you go. Grassroots funded lobbying. I don't think very much comes from lobbying. I mean, lobbying is just, activism, yes, protest, demonstrations, and all that. But lobbying, what is it? That's the, wealthy corporations hire some slick guy to sit down with politicians. Excuse me. I don't think that we're going to be able to out lobby the ruling class by any means. No, I'm not. I'm not. I'm not thinking that that's the case. The CPC Evergrande situation, they'll be able to handle this, right? Again, the Chinese Communist Party's in control. They'll be able to handle this. They'll be able to handle this. All right. Favorite pro-communist movies and documentaries. Pro-communist movies and documentaries. Well, Battleship Potemkin by Sergei Eisenstein is very good. October, 10 Days That Shook the World by Sergei Eisenstein is very good. That's very good. There's a film that was made in China during the Cultural Revolution. You can watch it on YouTube. It's called Breaking with Old Ideas. That's pretty good. I enjoy that. What other documentaries are there? There are some leftist documentaries. I wouldn't call them communist necessarily, that are pretty good. I mean, there's Salt of the Earth, right? That's a classic, right? Made by the Hollywood 10. That's a pretty good film. That's a classic. Salt of the Earth. What else? What else? Pro-communist movies. I mean, oh geez, what other pro-communist movies would I recommend? One movie that I really enjoyed, it's a fictional film, obviously, is The Spook Who Sat by the Door, which is a black liberation film from the 1970s. That's kind of about a black revolutionary group in the United States. It's pretty good movie. The movie that many people, many people in the anti-capitalist movement find very inspiring, which, John Carpenter, the guy who wrote it, admitted that it was inspired by anti-capitalism and the rhetoric of communist groups, and that was They Live The 1980s movie They Live, starring Roddy Piper. That's a very anti-capitalist film, very revolutionary, definitely inspired by like the Spartacus League and the Revolutionary Communist Party. I think he went and studied like communist groups, the communist groups that were around in the 80s. Um, I think he went and studied them because some of the scenes are so ridiculously allusions, to what the communist groups are doing. I mean, at one point they go to the revolutionary headquarters and they have a VHS tape playing of the great leader, the great revolutionary leader who's in exile, and it's like it's so obviously an allusion to the Revolutionary Communist Party and the RCP. If you look at the rhetoric in the 80s, you read like communist literature from the 80s, read what the Spartacist League was saying in the 80s, or you read what the RCP, Bob Avakian people were saying in the 80s, watch They Live. It's very much he kind of used the narrative of communist groups to make a very effective sci-fi movie. They Live, right? It's a great movie. It's a great movie. And the hero, of course, is a worker. He's a construction worker, this brawny construction worker. Put the glasses on. Put the glasses on. Right? It's a good movie. They Live. They Live. All right. Um, you know, um, Kautsky. Is it true that he only supported World War I because he wanted to keep his position? That's the point. That is the point, my friend. That's the point. That is not, it's not, he only did it because of, that's the point. You have stumbled upon the point. You have effectively stumbled upon the point. So the German Social Democratic Party built up such a machine under capitalism that when the going got tough, when the crisis arose, they didn't want to risk it. They had so many seats in parliament and so many trade unions and so many mass associations and such that when it came time to risk everything to oppose the war, and the revolutionary crisis came after the war, they had built up too much of an apparatus within the existing system that they weren't willing to risk it. And that's what happens. And Lenin wrote about this. If you read Dare We Win, it's a selection from Lenin's piece, Two Tactics of Social Democratic Revolution. If you read this essay, that Dare We Win, that's what he's pointing out, that if you build up enough of an apparatus under capitalism, right, eventually, when a revolutionary crisis comes, you won't be willing to take the risks. And that was what happened, right? That Karl Kautsky supported World War I because he wanted to keep his seat in parliament, and he wanted to keep the German SPD intact, and he wanted to keep his position. And that was the problem, right? It was time to take risks, like Rosa Luxemburg, like Karl Liebknecht. It was time to go to prison for opposing the war. It was time to engage in real resistance. But that would require the danger of losing everything that you have, right? And you have to, and that was the problem. The German Social Democratic Party became such a big bureaucracy and such a big entity in German society that when it came time to risk it all, they weren't willing to risk it, right? They weren't willing to go all in. And the crisis came. World War I was the crisis, and they were not willing to risk it. And that's a problem, right? That's a problem. Right? At the end of the day, if you really want to see a revolution happen, you need forces that are committed to making it happen. So there you go. I believe Jesus Christ said, "Whoever gains his life shall lose it. Whoever gains his life shall lose it." So anyway, on that note, folks, I will end the stream for now. A new upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression, but the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. And while the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today. Good night.